Well, hello traders and investors, I'm LA Little and this is your daily NeoTA wrap. We take a look at these markets and we do it from a neoclassical perspective. Each time we're asking ourselves what happened today and what might it tell us about the coming ones. I do this show 4 times a week, every Monday through Thursday. It's broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, archived on YouTube. It's under the channel LA Little. If you haven't subscribed, you can do so by reaching up in the right hand corner. Hit the subscription button. Anytime content's push, you'll get a notification. As far as what happened today, it's all about oil, folks. This oil market keeps rocking and rolling, and it's reeling with respect to these markets. This is the West Texas Intermediate. If you look at it, what you're going to see and what you saw if you were looking at most of these charts this weekend is you saw ABCD structures on the weekly, and almost all of them have played out. And so this market is at a point where it should bounce. But so far it hasn't. Today this thing cracked 28, closes around 29, closes at the lows of last week. That, of course, was pushing the market around all day long, and that was putting pressure on the markets. And if you look at the markets, the ending numbers, the NDX was down. Actually, the NDX was up, but the NASDAQ, the broader NASDAQ was down. The Russell was down over 1.25%, and the S&P eked out a 1-point gain. And that's after, 10% losses to start the year. Overnight here, you got the Nikkei, you got the Hang Seng getting hammered again as oil's, pressing lower. You had a bounce in Europe. That actually looked pretty good today. It didn't, the candle didn't close well, but it was an okay trade. And if you look down here at the oil market here on OIL, was just barely down. Gold, silver, they didn't do anything. And it's not the currencies, it's not anything other than oil that's driving these markets right now. And if I pop over, I want to show you what those currencies look like, because for so long there it was all about the currencies. So if I pull up the dollar chart here to start with, and we'll grab it and then we'll come back to the indexes. If I pull up the dollar chart and you look at it, right, it's still trading off that groggy bar basically. So it's still trading this basic range. You got a little bit of a push to the top side, a little bit of a push to the bottom side, but for the most part, it's still trading in that range. If you look at the euro, is doing the same thing. Now, if you look at other currencies have had some huge runs, but these two, which is the most of the dollar, right, is the euro. It's 50% of it right now. The vast majority is here. It's still trading inside or around that groggy bar. If I look at like the yen, for example, the yen had made a huge run to the upside. Today, it started to come off, fairly wide price spread. Tonight, I suspect it's back up there as a result of what's happening with oil and the fear trade. They run to the yen on the fear trade and cover. But for the most part, it's not the currencies, it's the oil market. Let's go back to the indexes and take a look at those again. Here's the S&P 500. So you get an inside bar, lighter volume, right? Inside bars typically don't tell you very much. And if you're looking at it on the daily, there's really nothing here to tell you much of anything. Now, if we pull it over, look at the weekly again, right? The August lows, 1867. Today being the first day of the week, you can see you traded under them again, 1864. So you go down, you trade into that low. You've got quite a bit lighter volume so far this week. So you're trading into it, you're not taking it out. Now, if this level falls, it's a big deal. But if this level holds, you're going to get a pretty good bounce out of it, right? And that's what a lot of traders are trying to position for, is trying to take this area and buy it, with some sort of a reasonable stop up underneath it, and then trying to get that big bounce, right? Because that bounce, when it bounces, if and when it bounces, right, it can carry up to here and still be nothing but a bounce, right? So you're talking about almost 2,000 on the price point. You're trading at 1880. You could get that kind of a move, 120 points, and be a bounce, 7-8%. That's how oversold this is right now. That's how big of a bounce it could get. Of course, there's some other points along the way that are going to be important if, in fact, it does start to bounce, like this swing point low as it comes back into it. We're talking about this one here, these over here, right? That whole area that we've talked about before, that's kind of the top range, which is up here, versus this bottom range, which is where we're trading now. So you're testing the bottom range. If this bottom range blows, right, then you got to think another range up underneath it. And that other range up underneath it is going to take out the October lows if in fact it happens. So this is a big area. This is a key area. If you want to make a bet, this is the area to make that bet, but you can turn into a goat pretty quick, so you need to have a plan if you're playing with that kind of fire. Looking over at the NASDAQ, you got the same thing. You got inside bars. So, excuse me, NASDAQ didn't. The Russell did. So the NASDAQ actually went over back under less volume. That's kind of a failure. It also went underneath this bar back over it and stayed over it. So a little bit of a toss-up, but overall kind of a negative setup. The NDX looks almost the same. And then if we look at the Russell was like the S&P, was an inside day with lighter volume. If we look overseas, especially in Germany to start with, but the DAX, the CAX, let's take the DAX first. And here you actually traded over the bar from yesterday. So the bar, we were closed yesterday. So the bar yesterday test underneath. So 94.59 was Friday's low. You test underneath 94.57. You have much lighter volume. Of course, it was a holiday here. You test underneath, back over, you hold it. Today, you get the bounce, just as you should. Tomorrow could potentially test again, given the way Europe is trading. Asia is trading tonight, and the way oil is pushing everything around. But right now, this thing actually has the good test on that time frame. Over here on a weekly time frame, you still have this low, but remember the DAX had already tested that big volume low. If we come over to the CAX, you got the same thing, under, back, over. You get the bounce today. Go to the weekly. Here, you're testing under last week. You're probably going to have as much volume, but the main thing is you're testing under the August low again, and you're trying to hold it. Now, it has to get back into it this week to really mean something, because you did break on the CAX at least last week. We look over to Asia, start with Shanghai. Shanghai gets the bounce up, has decent volume, right? Comes back up into this little congestion area. But right now, Shanghai, even though it got the nice little bounce, there's not a lot to hang your hat on, because you've come a long way. So, it's kind of a consolidation down here at the lows right now until it gets up higher. But it's not a bad looking trade the way it traded yesterday. If we look at the Nikkei, you kind of got the same thing, a little bit of a bounce, a little bit of a higher price point. Finally, let's go to Hong Kong. And Hong Kong now had traded way down. Hong Kong did not test yesterday's low, but did shoot back up above it. And as we saw at the top of the show, this was a, let me see, what did we get here from the night before? Is 19.2, and so you got about 400 move up, and it's about 400 down tonight. So it's almost a takeaway bar if it closes there. So if we look overseas, some positives in Europe, Asia not saying very much, markets here not saying very much. If I look at the sectors, there's only a couple of those. IBB in particular, the biotechs, gave you a little bit of a reversal, a 2-bar underneath. And as I said, it all comes back to this oil market. This oil market is where everything is right now, where everything's trading. And this is going to be the tail of the tape. ABCD structures completed here. ABCD structures completed in Europe on the weeklies. ABCD structures completed in Asia as well, and on some of the markets here in the U.S. So you've got the extensions. Now you need something to ignite this back up. What can ignite it, and what should ignite it, and what will ignite it is the oil market stabilizing and actually coming back up, right, and quit trading at 4 and 5% clips a day, especially to the downside. Just take a look at how far this thing has dropped in the last 3 weeks. 38 to 29, $9 on a 38. You're talking about large percentages, folks, and that's what's driving these markets. What's tomorrow going to bring? Well, if I had to put a bet on it, I would think that this thing's going to try to bottom again, but so far it's been a failed attempt to do so. We'll see if tomorrow makes any kind of a difference. That's it for tonight. I'll see you then. Have a great one, and until then, good night.